Once upon a time, I did a video on chain wrestling, and I made it because I thought that chain was in serious danger of becoming a dying art form. I also wanted to give casual fans a new way to look at and to score wrestling matches. But as important as chain is, I also have to say that it isn't the only mark of talent in the ring. There is another hallmark. One that might just be as endangered as well. Even worse still, it's something that some modern audiences might not even know how to appreciate in the first place. Which is exactly why it's the topic of this episode. Because today, Dave knows storytelling. To begin this story on stories, we naturally have to start with the beginning. Now, when it comes to humans telling tales, that's a story as old as humankind itself. But in wrestling, it has a lot to do with the carnival days. Now, I have mentioned wrestling sideshow origins before, but to give a brief recap, wrestling used to be a great way to scam people out of money. Traveling carnivals would sucker local crowds into betting against the carnival's own strongman in a wrestling match against a local hero. However, the bout was actually fixed. And this practice birthed many identifying traits of wrestling, but storytelling might just have been the most important. Because if you're going to fake a wrestling contest, you might as well make it captivating. And this approach would be very important for wrestling's future, because not only did early wrestling promoters have to get people invested in wrestling financially, but to do it right, they would also have to get them invested emotionally too, which is part of how wrestling got to be where it is now. Promoters found out that you didn't have to scam people out of their cash. People would voluntarily part with their money to watch wrestling if the match was actually compelling. But how do you do that? Well, simulating combat moves would not be enough alone, and showing off a series of awe-inspiring physical ability would be no help either, at least not in the long run. What you would have to do is you would have to use the wrestlers as performers to tell a narrative. The people should root for one guy to win, and they should root for the other guy to lose. We should also get to know their personalities and get an idea of what they're thinking, and more importantly, what they're feeling throughout the match at any given moment. For example, picture this.
The young local hero faces the seasoned circus strongman. The two men both start off by feeling each other out, testing the waters and throwing quick hand movements to check each other's reflexes and vulnerabilities. The hometown hero is getting nervous as the seasoned carnival veteran smiles with confidence. The young hero then decides he has to make his move, and he bravely darts in head first, but only to be overpowered by the strongman's giant arms and vice-like grip, which bring our hero down to his knees. And as valiantly as he might try to hang on, he has no choice but to submit.
Now that is just one possible story out of many possible variations, but you get the point. And if I was using actual people to tell this story, it would be sold even better. This story has emotions, a struggle, and a clear beginning, middle, and end. We understand the motivations going into the match, and we also see how factors such as strength, skill, and confidence from the strongman end up defeating youthful bravery and honor. And while we tend to root for admirable traits like courageousness and valor, which works to get us interested, it also causes us to feel the crush of defeat when our hero loses. And this is just one example of how storytelling can evoke emotions within its audience. Now, in today's wrestling scene, concepts such as these all seem to be getting away from us. There are some wrestlers out there that get criticized for merely showing off their acrobatic skill with flips and dives or taking for real career-shortening punishment. Meanwhile, they ignore storytelling or getting the audience invested emotionally. Trading moves and finishers back and forth with no rhyme or reason may be entertaining and exciting based off of pure adrenaline alone, but without an emotion component to it or a clear, concise narrative, the match will never reach its full potential. And also, it tends to just get old after a while and makes matches meaningless. If a big reversal leads to a momentum shift with a wrestler who was the aggravator now going on the defensive, it should be very clear why. Did his opponent roll out of the way from a high-risk maneuver? Did he miss his opponent and run into the turnbuckle? Did he trip and hurt his ankle? The dominant wrestler in a match shouldn't just arbitrarily switch back and forth. And if a big move does land, or even if it fails, there should be repercussions for it. You don't get to miss an outside dive and just get up 30 seconds later like nothing happened. We should know how this changed things, physically as well as mentally too, if possible. Now, this is not to say that storytelling is non-existent today, because that is definitely not the case. Matches like Piper Niven versus Toni Storm, where both women earned a mutual respect for each other by proving that anything one could do, the other could do too. Or Velveteen Dream versus Aleister Black, where the Dream demanded to be acknowledged by Aleister. Or AJ Styles versus Brock Lesnar, where AJ Styles worked hard to bring down the big man bit by bit until Brock used his brute strength to escape the calf crusher. These were great matches that told great stories, and you might have noticed that all these matches were from the WWE, and that's really no surprise. Because as much as wrestling snobs like to complain about the WWE, it's hard to deny that they haven't always been on top of their game when it comes to storytelling as a whole. Sure, there are plenty of independent promotions that tell a good tale, but classic WWE style matches are definitely hard to beat. As soon as you watch them, even if you tune in halfway, it's usually pretty obvious who's dominant and who's not, who's the heel and who's the face, who's cocky, who's wild, and who's scared, and so on. Overall, the company has usually done a good job with using physical body cues in order to convey certain beats in stories. When Hulk Hogan hooks up, we know that he's feeding off the crowd and has become invulnerable. When Ric Flair low blows someone after begging off, we know he's resorting to dirty tactics. When a wrestler fails to get a 3 count and then starts intensely stomping on his opponent, we know that he's grown frustrated at not being able to pick up the win. And while these cues may have been done elsewhere first, the point is that the company now known as the WWE usually obtains the best storytelling tricks sooner or later. Now, yes, there are those who have criticized that this type of storytelling is too obvious and therefore too juvenile. But if the story plays even to a little kid, then it's just doing its job by being very transparent. And it's that exact kind of catering to children that got me hooked to wrestling in the first place. Not to mention that simplicity is not always a bad thing either. And the WWE is also quite capable of complex storytelling too. Oh, and I should also note that a lack of storytelling is something that mediums outside of wrestling have been called out for as well. Blockbuster movies have been criticized for fast-cutting explosions and quips instead of genuine stories. Some will also point out how rap has changed from the days of Slick Rick the Storyteller to songs with no more substance than just rapping about how rich you are. Now, sure, these are gross generalizations and not true as a whole, because I personally feel that there are great stories told both in blockbusters and rap. I just wanted to point out that a fear of storytelling becoming extinct is something that many different forms of entertainment all seem to encounter. And most importantly, when it comes to great wrestling, it's important to know that it's not a one or the other scenario. You can have great chain wrestling, awe-inspiring physical moves, and do it all while telling a fantastic story. And yes, there are still plenty who fight the good fight. I'm not saying that there aren't. I just want you to be aware that great storytelling in wrestling could go the way of the dodo at any given moment. It needs the people to need it in order to stay in fashion. But as long as we do so, great wrestling will always live on. Happily ever after. Well, there are my thoughts on storytelling and wrestling, but what do you think? Let me know down in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe as well as giving this video a big thumbs up. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, Dave knows.